Today's history lesson is going to regard political parties. You may not be aware of this, but there was something called the party shift, which you need to learn about. So here's the lowdown on this. Here's the details. So, in the day of the founders, because our government is the government of a republic, meaning that we elect our own leaders. So we have a government that is based on a republic. Our founders were Republicans. Okay, they were the original Republican Party. And that existed all the way up until the time of Lincoln. Now, the party that kept the slaves, the party of the South, that represented the wealthy slave owners, they were known as the Whigs. Okay? After the Emancipation Proclamation, when Lincoln brought the country back together and made it so that the former slaves could not be bought and sold as chattel, or basically the same as you would a horse, a table, or a cow. Well, the Southern Whigs didn't care for that. And some 30 years later, they gradually started to change over and started to call themselves Republicans. They felt that they deserved to have their rights to vote, and they wanted it the way that it was in the Republic of old, and they became the Republicans. Whereas the Northern Republicans started to call themselves the Democrats because they believed in democracy. Now, there have been variations to that because at one time, as you know, the Republicans are the ones that came up with the Social Security premise. They're the ones that came up with that idea. Yes, it was the Republicans in the 1950s that instituted Social Security. But be aware of one thing. One always wants to say, and it's incorrect to say it, that Democrats were the slave owners. Technically, that's incorrect. It was the Whigs who were the slave owners. The Whigs were the opposite of the Republicans at the time. But you have to look at the values. The values of the Whigs, they endorsed slavery. Why not? It kept them wealthy. It kept their hands clean, essentially, except to dole out punishment. They didn't have to work the fields. So they produced product. They had slaves, and they could make more slaves, and they could buy and sell slaves. It was a win-win for them. But the Republicans, which was the party of Lincoln, and the Northern Republicans, they did not believe in that practice. They thought it wrong. Not because they had any love for black people, but they thought that it was wrong to buy and sell a human being. So they did respect black people as human beings, but not full human beings. And for that, you can look up the Dred Scott decision from the Supreme Court, Dred Scott, which was a horrible decision. Even to this day, it's criticized. Nonetheless, through the process of party shift, where one party decides that it wants to have certain values connected with another party, that's where you got the name changes. So essentially, while the Whigs were the opposite of the Republican Party, they were not Democrats, not at that point. And those Whigs eventually became what we now know as the Republican Party. But what was the Republican Party of old, the party of Lincoln, became the Democratic Party. That's right. The Northern people went for democracy, and that's where you got the Democratic Party.